And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, of course, is my beautiful co-host Laraib as we dive into the NFL Week 9 action. It's crazy that it's already been halfway through the season, Laraib. Just imagine us doing this right in the beginning, and here we are in Week 9. All these teams starting to kind of find their way, and also, we didn't cover this in last episode, but the NFL trade deadline just happened. So a lot of different pieces are on a lot of different teams now, and things are getting very interesting.
Yeah, the pretenders are starting to wither away, and the contenders are really starting to come out to the front, Lewis. Just before we get into our predictions for Week 9, just our Eagles and Texans matchup predictions that were on our Tuesday pod at the end of that. So go ahead and check that out, Lewis. But without further ado, let's get into Week 9, and why don't we start off with the byes? 6 teams on bye this week, Lewis. We have the Browns, Broncos, Cowboys, Giants, Steelers, and the 49ers. So,
Wow.
a lot of teams on bye, a lot of fantasy implications about that, Lewis. But disregarding all that, let's move into the first game of Week 9. We have the Los Angeles Chargers coming off a bye, playing the Atlanta Falcons, the NFC South leaders, Atlanta Falcons. Chargers -3 on the road, Lewis. What are you looking at in this game?
There's been some concerning things coming out of Chargers camp, specifically with wide receiver Keenan Allen after the bye week, complaining that his hamstring feels worse, which is concerning because the wide receiver core there in Los Angeles has been very, very poor. But what have we seen from the Falcons secondary these past 2 weeks against the Panthers and against the Bengals is they are absolute Swiss cheese. And if there's any game that you want to start Big Mike Dub in fantasy, or maybe pick up a Josh Palmer, it's against this Falcon secondary because they can't contest anybody. So that's the biggest matchup for me is this semi-depleted Chargers wide receiving core, but with Justin Herbert against this depleted Falcon secondary. And I think, just coming off a super emotional win last week at home, then to turn around, still play at home, and the Chargers with all their weapons on the outside, minus Keenan Allen, you still have Eckler. Everett's been a solid tight end for them this season. So I think that distinct matchup makes me favor the Chargers in this one.
Yeah, Lewis, there's a lot of complete opposites in this game. Let me tell you, the Atlanta Falcons have the 5th best rushing attack in the NFL, and now they're playing against the 6th worst rush defense in the Chargers. And then you flip it over to the other side, you have the Chargers who have the 4th best passing defense playing up against the worst passing. The Chargers are the 4th best facing the worst in the Atlanta Falcons pass defense. And so it's just going to be which one of these teams is going to be more worse or less worse this Sunday. And I like the Chargers. I think Justin Herbert can get it done. It's going to be a close game, but
better.
Even with all those players missing, I like the Chargers 27-24, Lewis.
Interesting thing to note, Cordarrelle Patterson will be back, activated off IR. He's coming back off a knee injury. So that just bolsters this Falcons already potent rushing attack, as you mentioned. So in this game, if the Falcons want success, they need to make sure their defense is not on the field that much. And against this Chargers defense, I mean, it's going to be, the Falcons have been a frisky team all year. You're as good as your record says you are. So this is going to be a fun game, but I think the Chargers need this one to stay in contention in the AFC, especially in that division that's slipping away towards the Chiefs. So I think the Chargers will win this one on the road. I'm going to go 27-24. LA wins this.
Good prediction, Lewis. Let's move on to another game that we have. The Miami Dolphins at 5-3 visiting the Chicago Bears. Miami -5. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears offense, Lewis, a little bit. The past couple of weeks, Justin Fields has been heating up, even though, they lost to the Cowboys last week. He still put up an admirable performance. And then they just traded for Chase Claypool. And so how do you think that will be, for Justin Fields? How will that impact his development moving forward and in this big game against the Dolphins?
Yeah, it won't at all in this game. I'll tell you that much. A lot of, there's always kind of damning whenever you see reports from fans wanting a player traded. Like, oh, that's odd. Like, why would you want him traded so bad? Is it just the elevation of the young rookie in Pickens, or has Claypool been more of a problem? And from what we've seen from him from the past few seasons, he's been more of a handful. But maybe with the increased role in this Bears offense, and like you said, Justin Fields, inclining play as of late, he's been really playing well. And I think, getting this run game going, the Dolphins are adding a new piece of their own and Bradley Chubb on the other side of the ball. I think this is a good matchup for the Bears. A team that's starting to find its identity. I really like what Luke Getsy has been doing in making Justin Fields your best offensive playmaker is your quarterback, making sure he has the ball in his hands 90% of the time, whether it's designed runs, quarterback draws, quarterback keeps, whatever you need. Make sure he is your primary playmaker, and they've been very successful. So I think this line against the Dolphins is kind of they still think the Bears is this really bad offense, but they've been figuring things out. And yes, you trade away Roquan Smith, you trade away Robert Quinn, but I think for me that just means you kind of trust some of your younger guys to get more of a role. Now against this Dolphins passing attack, there is a lot of cause for concern, but I think the Bears have a decent chance of covering in this ball game.
Yeah, I think the Bears can cover Lewis, but I still think just the offense of Miami, what they've been able to do, what they've done this season with Tua coming back, Waddle and Tyreek have just been exploiting defenses that that duo leads the league in receiving yards. And one interesting thing for me has been Tyreek Hill. We know he's been a speed demon, but just the contested catches that you've seen this guy go up and make. He's less than 6 foot tall, and he can get up there. He's got sticky hands, and so
Absolutely.
I'm really been impressed with his contested catchability, and that's why I'm going to take the Dolphins in this one, Lewis. I like the Dolphins. High scoring. I think Justin Fields can maintain some of that success in this one, but I still like the Dolphins 31-27.
And you know what, Laraib, after thinking about it, my biggest concern with this Dolphins team is their rushing attack. Can they put away a team like the Bears with a frisky, kind of upstart offense away in a fourth quarter if they have a big lead? I don't think they can. I think, you trade away Edmonds, you bring in Jeff Wilson, but he's not really going to be involved in the system. Raheem Mostert's kind of here and there, and their offensive line rushing ability leaves a lot to be desired. So I think this is a game where you could potentially have Miami get out to a hot start, but then the Bears chip away, and they find a way to win and improve to a frisky 4-5, giving Tua his first loss for the season of him playing an entire game. So I like the Bears for the upset. I'm going to go Chicago 28 to Dolphins 23, and it's going to be a very exciting game and a meltdown that we'll be talking about on our Monday pod, hopefully. But Laraib, let's move on to our next matchup of the noon slate. We have the Carolina Panthers traveling to Cincinnati to face the Bengals. Bengals -7 in this matchup, Laraib. As we saw their offense on that Monday night performance against the Browns without Jamar Chase, they just looked apoplectic in the first half. They just could not get anything going. The run game was looking really rough, and Myles Garrett was just dominating that offensive line. Panthers don't have a terrible defense of their own, Laraib. So what success can the Bengals offense have, looking at the mistakes from that Monday night game without Jamar Chase, knowing he won't be there this week? What adjustments can they make to have more success?
Well, Lewis, it all comes down to that offensive line. We've been hammering about them all week. I know you were singing their praise on our Tuesday pod, and that game, they just proved you wrong, Lewis. And so I think it's going to be trying to get the ball out quickly for Joe Burrow. We know he has a tendency to hold on to it longer, and try to find those deep plays down the field. But with Jamar Chase not out there, you just have to trust guys like T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, proven wide receiver commodities. Just get it out to them quick and let them do what they do. I know Joe Mixon. He's an awesome runner, but they really don't get him involved in the passing game as much as I wish they would. I like Samaje P. Ryan. Of course, he's their third down receiving back, but Joe Mixon, he's shown he's a capable receiver. And I especially need him for my fantasy team to catch some of those passes. So I think I like some of the short game in this one, Lewis. You have to give the Panthers defense some respect. And so look for some quick balls out of Joe Burrow this weekend.
I was very impressed with this Panthers offense after the performance they put up last week. Yes, a Hail Mary getting completed in the last few seconds isn't something you can rely on every week. But PJ Walker has been gaining confidence week after week after week after just getting reps in with this offense. You remember his first start against the Rams, in which he didn't complete anything past the line of scrimmage, to now he's dropping bombs to DJ Moore down the field and helping my fantasy team out. But yeah, I've been very impressed with what I've seen. And this Bengals defense, they've been solid all year. But I think this is a tough matchup for the Bengals coming off a short week. Now the Panthers, a very emotional loss. How do you rebound with a interim head coach, with your backup quarterback? What is the plan here? I just trust this Bengals franchise at the at this moment more to where I think the Bengals can win this game, but I think it's going to be by the skin of their teeth. Evan McPherson bounce back game. I'm going to go Bengals 24, Panthers 23. McPherson gets it done in the end.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I think it's gonna be a little bit more of a Bengals lead. Give me the Bengals 28-24, Lewis. But let's move on to another game. We have a divisional matchup up there in the NFC North. The Green Bay Packers are playing the Detroit Lions. Interesting line, Lewis. Green Bay only -3.5, which is really interesting to see after Aaron Rodgers has dominated the Lions franchise for his entire tenure over there in Green Bay. And so, after this Lions team has got off to a quick start, but has really fallen off, Lewis, what do you think they can do to beat this Packers squad, which has been struggling a little bit?
Well, what I've heard this season is these aren't your big brothers Packers, but these are the same old Lions. The Lions are still the Lions. But the line is interesting when you think about how these two teams have faced in the past. And the Lions have actually had pretty decent success against the Packers in Detroit, not necessarily winning those games, but in their last 8 matchups, the Lions are 5-3 against the spread. So having the Lions, small as this is, shows somewhat of a respect for this Lions team, but also what we've seen from this Packers team for the past 4 weeks, in which they have looked just lost offensively and they just cannot get out of their own way. This is definitely, division matchup. It's going to be close. The biggest matchup for me in this one is the awful Packers receivers against this awful Lions secondary that just got absolutely torched last week. How can how can they attack them effectively using the weapons that they have? We obviously know, and a lot of Packers fans are upset that no trades were made at the deadline to acquire any additional offensive talent. And if they hear the name Odell Beckham Jr., Packers fans are going to throw up after hearing all the speculation for him for the past, 7 years. So I think the biggest thing in this game is how much of an impact can Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon have in the passing game? And can you get them out in multiple sets? You need to see more from Tunyon, I think. And receivers, you just need to get their confidence built, Throw them a bubble screen, give them a toss reverse or something like that. Just get them reps in to when you need them in those big moments, like we saw from Romeo Doubs against the Bucks. He'll make those big catches, and I think he will in this game. I like the Packers.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Lewis. No Alan Lazard from last week, but I think he's suiting up for this one, and so that would be a great addition for them to come back. And we know it's the 2 running backs on the ground that really get it done. We saw AJ Dillon; he was a little banged up in that game, but Aaron Jones was just dominating the Bills all over the ground. And so I think if there's any week that this Packers wide receiver core can ball out, it's obviously going to be this one. And so I'm gonna pick the Packers just like you, Lewis. It's gonna be high scoring, but I think our boy Mason Crosby gets it done, 31-28, Green Bay. But Lewis, let's move on.
As much as I hate, one more thing, Laraib. As much as I hate picking the Packers, I'm gonna have to go with him in this one. I'm gonna go with the Packers 31 to Lions 28. I think it's gonna be a fun, exciting game, but the Packers get it done in the end. But Laraib, let's move on now to our next game of the week. We have the Indianapolis Colts facing the New England Patriots at New England. New England -5.5. And I'd love to pull out the old narrative of Bill Belichick dominates, young quarterbacks, especially at home. But after we saw from what Justin Fields and Matt Eberflus did in New England a few weeks ago, does it make you a little apprehensive to pick the Patriots in this one?
No. No, it just doesn't at all, Lewis. I know a lot of people like Michael Pittman, but he had some drop issues last week. And besides him, Jonathan Taylor just has not looked the same this season. He's banged up. He's questionable for this game. The offensive line isn't what it has been. And so you're talking about a Colts team who just lost to the Commanders last week. And the Patriots who've been, they beat the Jets last week and now they're at home. I think this is a classic Bill Belichick game playing against a young quarterback. And, Mac Jones, despite all the mistakes he's had this season, some bad picks and, awful throws, I think they can still get it done in a low score game at home.
I think one of the more unfortunate storylines this season is this Colts defense has actually been very solid this season. It's just the fact that their offense has been through so much chaos through the beginning of this season that they don't really get the credit they deserve because they're losing a lot of games that they're setting up for their offense to win. The Broncos get a lot of that attention just of how jarringly bad their offense has been. But for the Colts, it's been the same scenario. But I think, on the road, if they can't get, consecutive stops, even if they just let the Patriots get field goals, that's more than your offense is going to get on the other side. So I just want to give a shout out to the Colts defense because I think they can cause problems for the Patriots offense in this game. And I don't want to be made a fool by locking up the Patriots and saying it's a automatic home run slam dunk. But I just think Sam Ehlinger, he had a few good plays, especially in that second half against the Commanders last week, but really all for naught as he couldn't get it done in the end. I just don't think I don't think he is the mettle of a Justin Fields to go into Foxborough and beat a Bill Belichick coach defense. So I do like the Patriots in this game. I'm going to go lower scoring. I'm going to go 24 to Colts 13.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to go low scoring as well. I'll pick the Patriots 23-17 at home. Patriots catch another dub as they try to sneak into the AFC playoffs, Lewis. But let's move on to the game of the week. We have the Buffalo Bills going to New York to play the Jets.
Oh.
Buffalo minus 12.5, Lewis. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident would you say you are that the Bills will cover this line?
To cover, I will actually say I'm at a 12. I'm at a 12. I think this is a complete talent mismatch, and a lot of people have been questioning the Bills this week after not really covering against the Packers and keeping them in that game with costly turnovers. And I just think what I've seen from Zach Wilson and this Jets offense, we talked about on the Monday podcast, has been less than desirable to keep it nice. I just don't think he's that guy for New York. I'd love for him to prove me wrong and beat the Bills. But at the same time, I think this Bills team is focused this week. I think they're going – no, they already had their bye week. But I think this is a very important game for them, road, divisional opponent. So I think they're going to have enough, they're going to be locked into this one. I think they're going to want to send a message, especially after last week, that they can put away games, that they can finish. So I do like the Bills in this matchup.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Josh Allen, currently the MVP frontrunner. I think this is just another one of those games where he just dominates. And like you mentioned, Zach Wilson really has not shown anything to, make me have any faith in this Jets team at all this season. And for the Bills, this is going to be one of those games where you just go out and just dominate. And so I like for them to do that, Lewis. I like the Bills 34-23.
Yeah, and I got to agree with you, Laraib. I think this is a game where the Bills get out early. Jets put a little bit of a comeback together, but it's just all for naught. I think the Bills win big. I'm going to go 41, Jets 17. They get a cheap touchdown late to make it look somewhat respectable. But, Laraib, let's move on to our next game of the noon slate. First, complaint, right? We have 2 3:00 games this week and 7 noon games. I mean, come on now. I like watching football as much as you, especially Red Zone. When you only have 2 3:00 games and one of them is Rams Bucks, whatever. I guess I thought that'd be a much more entertaining game. Come on, NFL. You could have at least moved I don't know, Packers Lions. That would have been a fun game, but it is what it is. This is one of those weird weeks with 6 teams on bye. Pardon my little tangent. But let's move on now for our next noon game. We have the Minnesota Vikings traveling to Washington to face the Commies, who are under a lot of scrutiny at the moment. Minnesota's favored by 3.5 on the road, Laraib. What are you expecting not only for this game, but maybe long-term? Is this offense going to look any different with the addition of TJ Hawkinson, now tight end for the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, I think it should, Lewis. He commands a lot of respect. Take command. No, he's definitely gonna help open up some of the passing lanes. I know we like Irv Smith as a tight end, but he's just not the same type of receiving threat that you get out of TJ Hawkinson. A guy who can really stretch the field, intermediate routes, short routes. He's one of those guys who can play all around. And he's just going to add another dimension to this passing offense. Whenever you get the passing going, that's what really moves those linebackers out of the box to allow the big runs from Dalvin Cook. So I really like this addition for this offense. And then, I was talking about this game a little bit. It's going to be a Kirk Cousins revenge game at 12. So Solar Kirk is coming out for this one. And I like the Vikings on the road, Lewis.
Yeah, I think you're missing TJ Hawkins' best trait, and that's him as a blocker. And that's what this Vikings team has been missing. They've had a solid front five in terms of their offensive line. But when you saw this rushing team, or for the Vikings, like at least historically at their best, it's with Kyle Rudolph, who was a great blocker, and he was also a threat at tight end. Because sometimes you have those designated blocking tight ends who are never going to affect you in the passing game. But he's a dual threat Gronk type of blocker, not as great as a receiver as Gronk, but he's competent enough to where defenses have to respect him, and that opens up everything for what the Vikings want to do. Play action is Kirk Cousins' best friend, especially when that running game is going. So having that extra almost offensive lineman who can also get out and make contested catches and extend plays for you is huge for this team. So I think for this game, he might not have too much of an impact just because he's, making that adjustment to a new life, new setting with a new offense. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, but I think long-term, this is a huge addition for them. But to this game specifically, I think the biggest thing for me is Taylor Heineke. He's been on a hot streak recently, undefeated as a starter. Commanders kind of building up some confidence here. Vikings have been flying real high recently, Laraib, and I think they need a good whooping, but it won't be today because I think the Vikings win this game. Like you said, this is just on a silver platter for Kirk Cousins, noon game against his former team. He's going to give a few you like that. He's going to give a bunch of big smiles. So I think the Vikings win this one. I'm going to go Vikings 28 to Commanders 23. Commanders keep it close, but all for naught.
Yeah, and Lewis, it's going to be really interesting to see if the Vikings do lose this game. I know we like them at 6-1. Obviously, they played an all right schedule. Nobody too crazy. But whenever you lose these games like this, random week 9 game, it's going to really have a big impact on this team. But I still like the Vikings 27-23, Lewis. But we'll see how this one pans out. But let's move on to another game, Lewis. We have the Las Vegas Raiders at 2-5. Playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars at 2-6.
Just smells bad.
Now having the Raiders at -1.5, Lewis, is really interesting to see. After both of these teams are just terrible. You think it would be closer to even. And so, what do you think this Raiders team can do to win on the road?
It's so crazy to me, Laraib, because at both these teams' best, we've seen them put up great performances. We've seen the Raiders, just destroy teams offensively, especially running the ball. And then with the Jaguars, in the beginning of the season, they were shutting teams out and they looked cohesive. And then look how they fall back into what we perceive as been the Raiders and the Jaguars for the last 15 years of our lives. At 1.5, I don't mind it. I think it's actually probably a little low. I think the Raiders are just a better team. They just had one of those weeks where can't really explain it. Just Halloween in New Orleans, the voodoo was out. I think this is a game in which the matchup does favor the Raiders. I just think the Jaguars' defensive line has not been very impressive so far this season. They had a good first week with Trayvon Walker, but I really haven't heard his name at all since then. So I think this is a bounce back game for the Raiders. I think they get the running game going, and maybe, after all the scrutiny, Devontae Adams gets more than 3 yards receiving. So yeah, I feel like you kind of have to go with the Raiders in this one, just because what we've seen from the Jaguars the last 4 weeks has not been very promising.
Yeah, Lewis, I will say I think this game is going to be really, really close. All 6 of Jacksonville's losses have been by 1 score, and 4 of Las Vegas losses have been also by 1 score. And so I think it's going to be a really close game.
Except for one.
I think it's going to come down to these 2 running backs, Etienne and Jacobs, whichever one of those has a better game. I think that offense comes out on top. And our boy Daniel Carlson, one of 2 kickers in the NFL to not have missed any field goals this season. If you can name the second one and put them in the comments, I'll Venmo you $1 on the second kicker in the NFL who has not missed a kick, not missed a field goal, minimum 10 attempts in the season. And I think Daniel Carlson, he gets it done. So give me the Raiders 26-23, Lewis.
So I'm trying to think about. You know what? We'll leave it in the comments if you can guess it or look it up. We won't judge. But let's move on to our next matchup, Laraib. We have your Seattle Seahawks traveling to Arizona in the desert to face the Cardinals. Cardinals favored by 2 in this one, despite being 2 games behind Seattle in the standings, Laraib. Is this just because it's home field advantage? Because we saw these teams play a few weeks ago and Seattle beat them pretty soundly. What do you think happens in this one?
Well, Lewis, I think with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, this the Cardinals' offense is starting to heat up, quite significantly, even with the loss of Hollywood Brown, and I think that's what they're looking at with the +2 for the Seahawks. But I still think I still really like the Seahawks. Our defense is playing really really well. We're top 5 for yards through the air, which is awesome to see. But whenever we're playing against DeAndre Hopkins, it's gonna be a really tough matchup. And if either Tariq Woolen is on him or Kobe Bryant, we'll see who comes at top on that one. But I still think last time these teams match up, the Cardinals didn't score any offensive touchdowns. I think the Seahawks, we just hammered down with the rushing attack and with Geno Smith. I think we can, win a close one on the road.
So I'm going to disagree with you on this one, Laraib. I think what you said about the Cardinals offense is very true. And you've just seen the uptick in their scoring. Kyler Murray has deep trust for DeAndre Hopkins. And I think that's, what you've seen is their deep trust. Now, I will say this Cardinals defense has not been that great this season. They're a very aggressive defense, a young defense, but they just like all their players outside of Buda Baker really are not that impressive. And what I've seen from the Seahawks team is a poise that I've not seen from the Cardinals so far. So I think this is one of those games where it just comes down to desperation. And the Cardinals are the more desperate team at the moment. I think you can really beat up on the Seahawks defense. As much as we love our boy Tariq Woolen and some of the other young guys on the Seahawks, they just aren't ready enough. And yes, they held the Cardinals to 9 points in their first meeting. But I think this is a new Cardinals offense. They're starting to kind of figure out a rushing game. Keontae Ingram has been looking impressive, their rookie this season, along with Eno Benjamin. And I believe James Conner is not playing in this one, but that's still to be determined by the time we were filming this on Wednesday. So I like the Cardinals in this one. I think it's more of just they need a split in this game. And if I'm going to get an edge on you in any of the games this week, it's going to be betting against the Seahawks. So I'm going to go with the Cardinals. And it's going to be a close one, a fun one in the desert. Your typical Russell Wilson magic games from the past, but no Russ, just a better quarterback, but no magic. So I'm going with the Cardinals. I'm going to go 31-30.
Yeah, last time Lucy also predicted a high scoring game in this one, but I think it comes down to just the dysfunction that's in the Cardinals organization, right? Kyler and Cliff have been bickering back and forth. And so I like the Seahawks, Lewis. I'm going to, once again, or this time I'm going to go low scoring, but I like the Seahawks 23-20. I think Geno plays a clean game, no turnovers for this offense, and we come out with a win and a clean sweep, Lewis.
This is a game for me, Laraib, in which I say this is a prove it game. For the Cardinals, prove that you're a decent team and prove that, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be a head coach after Monday. For the Seahawks, prove you're a legit team. This is a game that, in all honesty, you should win if you're a good football team. And we saw the Seahawks drop a game on the road in New Orleans in which they were the better team. So this is a game, if the Seahawks are legit and not just a fun early season storyline, this is a game they need. So maybe that's what I think of the team. I don't know. That'll be my judgment on Monday's podcast. But let's move on now, Laraib, to the Battle of Mid, as they're calling it. Oh, how the Kings fall. The Rams traveling to Tampa. Tampa favored by 3, but it's not because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been impressive. It's because the Rams have looked 3 points worse throughout this season, Laraib. You looked at the matchups in this game. What matchup stands out to you the most and swaying which direction you're going in this one?
Well, Lewis, I think it really comes down to this Bucks defense against this Rams offensive line. Let me just throw some numbers out to you. The Rams are 0-4 this year when Matt Stafford gets sacked multiple times in one game. And I know this Bucks defense has really fallen off a cliff the past couple of weeks, giving up big plays, big yards, on the ground to the air. They just haven't been the same team that we've seen defensively, at least, and offensively. But I think in this one, if they can get some pressure on Matt Stafford and then offensive line, I think they can eke out a win. I know Cooper Kupp, he was questionable for this game, but I think he's going to play. But still, with him banged up, it's going to be really hard to, watch this Rams offense do anything at all.
Yeah, and you think about the biggest problem for the Buccaneers so far this season is their run defense. They've been one of the worst run defenses, which has been so odd because we've always thought of them as this stout run defense through the Tom Brady era and even the season before. So I think the biggest thing for me in this game is the lack of running attack that the Rams need to set up their play action. And especially if a guy like Cooper Kupp, he will play on Sunday. But even then, is he 100%? He is their only source of offense. So there's a lot of concerning things when you look at the matchup for this Bucs defense against the Rams offense. Even though Shaquille Barrett went down with an Achilles injury, they still have some studs on that defensive front who can cause problems for this Rams team, especially if they can't run the ball. So I think Tom Brady and their offense, they just do enough to get it done. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I don't think, the only reason people are liking this game because of the quarterback matchup and the pedigree of the defending champs. But I like the Bucs in this game, and just because of that defense-offense matchup, I feel very confident in the Bucs in this game. So I'm going to go 24 to Rams 10, and it's ugly.
Well, I'm gonna think it's a little bit closer than that, Lewis. I will say the Bucs do have the 7th best scoring defense in the league. And the Rams are 0-4 when they're facing a top 10 scoring defense. And so I really like the Bucs in this one. Give me the Buccaneers 20-17, Lewis. But let's move on to Sunday night football. We have the Tennessee Titans at 5-2 facing the Chiefs, are also 5-2, but Kansas City minus 12.5, Lewis. Really, really big line in this one. And you know what? I'm taking Tennessee in this one, guys. Let me list off some stats for you guys. All right.
Go ahead.
Andy Reid is 0-4 against the Titans since 2014. All right. And now I know you're going to come out and say that Andy Reid is 20-3 coming off a bye, but I really like the Titans in this one. King Henry has just dominated against his Chiefs front the past decade. Every single time he gets a carry against the Chiefs, Lewis, he averages 5.6 yards a carry against the Chiefs, which is just astronomically bad for the Chiefs. And so I like the Titans on the road. We've seen them beat this Chiefs team before, and I think they can do it once again, Lewis.
There's a lot of questions that come up when you bring these, historic stats of the record between these two teams and what these teams had available to them in 3 of those matchups. No Tyreek Hill in those games, which is very interesting.
Oh, no
he won't
Tyreek
be
Hill
playing in this
either.
one. Yes, he won't be playing in this one either. But what has been the difference between these two teams this season? This Titans defense has been nowhere near the team it's been in the past, as they are ranked 17th in the league, around league average. But the Chiefs are the highest scoring offense in the NFL at home, off a bye. Andy Reid scheming it up, and you brought up the stat for me. I didn't even have to dig for it. 20-3 off a bye. And I love Mike Vrabel. I respect him as much as any coach in the league, even though, you hate him so much. Now you want to pick him. But I think that, some of the additions, who knows? Kadarius Toney might even play in this game. The biggest question that you failed to bring up is Ryan Tannehill and his availability. He is questionable, presumed to play. But if he's on 100%, there's no chance you're matching this team. And when they have beaten him, maybe they had a guy like, I don't know, A.J. Brown on their team who was missing from this matchup. This receiving core has the second least receiving yards in the entire NFL through 8 weeks. And I don't know how you trust any of these guys on the outside when it comes down to it. And Treylon Burks, he's on IR. So it's like all Robert Woods. And I can't even name you another receiver on that team if I wanted to. So good luck. Austin Hooper. There you go. He's the tight end.
Well, Lewis, let me just mention one guy to you. We only need one guy. King Henry. Crown him. King Henry. He's going to go out there and put on a show. And I like the Titans, Lewis, 27-24. Tighten up.
I think with a banged up Tannehill, you're not going to be able to punish them with King Henry late in the game, which are trailing by 3 scores. So I just don't think I don't see this tight unless they get out to a big lead, which this team is capable of if they just get a bunch of good possessions string together. And, Patrick Mahomes, he's made a few mistakes this year, but 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions versus Ryan Tannehill's 6 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. I'll take the former. I'll take the Chiefs, and I'm going to go 30 to Titans 20. I think the Titans will cover the 12.5. I'll give them that much respect, but I don't think they have a shot in the dark to win this game, Laraib.
All right, well, Lewis, that will conclude our Sunday matchups, but let's move on to Monday Night Football. Your New Orleans Saints will host the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore -2.5 on the road, Lewis. We've seen this Saints offense, start to heat up a little bit despite some mistakes out of Andy Dalton. What do you think that he can do in this game with some guys coming back like Jarvis Landry to keep up with this Baltimore defense and this Baltimore offense?
I think Andy Dalton has been very impressive this year, despite some of the mistakes he's made in previous games. And this Ravens defense, although they're aggressive, a lot of guys, their secondary is already getting injured. Marcus Williams, former New Orleans Saint, I'm sure he really wants to play for this one. He is questionable. No Rashad Bateman. Mark Andrews is questionable. Gus Edwards is questionable. All these guys have been banged up this entire season. So it's hard to see what Ravens team you're getting. But there is one certainty with the Ravens, and his name is Lamar Jackson. And from what I've seen from the Saints defense against mobile quarterbacks is they run this way. They run straight. And if you run around them, they are cooked. And I just think this is a really, really bad matchup for this Saints defense. So I'm going against the grain here. I know I'd
Ooh.
love to be wrong. This is a game. I know you want me to pick my Saints, but I'm going with the Ravens in this one. It's purely based off Lamar. But if our defense can play like it did last week, the first 6 weeks of the season, maybe we'll have a chance in this one. But I do like the Ravens on the road in New Orleans on Monday night.
Well, Lewis, what really comes down to me, you know how much of a numbers person I am. It comes down
Of
to Andy
course,
comes down to Andy Dalton being 6-18 in primetime games, which is second worst in the NFL.
to Kirk
And
Cousins.
and Lamar being 13-1 against NFC teams. And so I think the Ravens, they bring in some guys, they trade for Roquan Smith. And like you said, Lamar Jackson is really going to be the X factor in this game. And it comes down to the Saints defense. If they play like they played this past weekend, they can definitely get this win on home. And with the crowd being the X factor in that one, I could easily see the Saints winning. But I think the Ravens, they're on a mission this year. They got a couple pieces. They're right there in the thick of things in the AFC playoff race. And so I like the Ravens on the road 26-23.
And I'm going to agree with you, Laraib. I think Justin Tucker in a dome. Get ready for a Tucker masterclass. I'm going to go with Ravens 22 to Saints 17. I think it's just a game in which the Saints offense struggling to get the running game going. Ravens, Lamar just gets enough done in the end to win the game for the purple and gold. But, Laraib, that'll do it for this week of our picks. However, we still have our locks, upsets, and best bets of the week. So I'll go ahead and start with my upset of the week. It wasn't an easy decision this week. I'll admit that much. But after watching what I've seen from the Bears in the past 2 weeks of their offense improving, I like the spirit of this team. And the Dolphins, a lot of new parts getting thrown into the mix right here. I think this is a game that they kind of just drop thinking about, the next game on their schedule against the Bills. So I do like the Bears in this one, playing spoiler. And I just like their energy as a team right now.
Yeah, and for my upset, I think you guys already know it's the Tennessee Titans. Andy
It
Reid
better be.
0-4 against the Titans. He's about to be 20-4 coming off a bye after this loss. And King Henry is coming out to play for this one. And then for my lock of the week, Lewis, I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. Initially, I was thinking about the Ravens, but with a couple of questions on the offensive side of the ball about who's playing, I think I can put a little bit more trust in Aaron Rodgers with this one is gonna bite me for sure.
Go
Lewis,
ahead.
with Alan Lazard coming back, I think they can beat this worst ranked defense against the Lions. And so I like the Packers as my lock of the week.
And for my lock of the week, I am going with the GOAT in Tom Brady at home. All these big games for the Buccaneers are always at home. Just crazy how that works out. But I think this is a game they need. I think the matchup is amazing for them. This Rams team is really just reeling at this point. So I think the Bucs taking advantage of a great situation. Tom Brady does just enough, but the defense is what really gets it done in this one. I like the Buccaneers as my lock. And for my best bet of the week, it's Bill Belichick against a young rookie quarterback and Sam Ellinger. not a rookie, but his rookie season as a starter in the NFL. And I think he makes life miserable for the young quarterback. So I like the Patriots to cover the 5.5 points at home.
And for my best bet of the week, I'm going to pick the Seahawks at +2. Facing against this Cardinals team, which we know are fraudulent, a lot of dysfunction between coach and quarterback. And I think the Seahawks team is playing really, really well. And they go out there and they at least cover, if not win that one, Lewis.
At least cover. All right. Well, that's going to do it this week for our picks of the week and our episode of the podcast. As always, make sure you check in our socials and our links below so you don't miss any content from our podcast. And also, if you want to, like Laraib said in the beginning, if you're looking for the Thursday night football game between Philadelphia and Houston, no, it's not the World Series, then go ahead and check out our last podcast where we also break down a lot of the big news from last week's games. But Laraib, that'll do it for this week's episode. Any last remarks?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and put down in the comments who is the second or the number 2 kicker who has 100% field goal percentage this season, minimum 10 field goals. Go ahead and put that down in the comments for a $1 on Venmo. But with that being said, Lewis, this is the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.